Good afternoon, everyone. A few people still trickling in, so we'll let them get into the room. Thank you all so much for joining us for our noonday resolution listening session. It's good to have you all today. All right. Well, by my clock, I have 12:02. And for those of you who have been in meetings with me before, you know I like to start promptly. So we will start promptly today. And just to kind of let you know what we're going to do, we're going to open with prayer. And then I'm going to take a moment and give some of our nominees to standing committee the opportunity to introduce themselves. And I'll talk about that in a second after we pray. And then we'll move into our resolution listening time. So let us begin in prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. O God, who sculpted the mountains and filled the seas, who breathed the winds and ignited the stars, who animated the atom and fashioned the whale, sculpt us in compassion and fill us with mercy. Breathe us in courage and ignite us in hope. Animate us in peace and fashion us in love, now and all our days. Amen.
Amen.
Well, again, thank you all for joining us today for our second resolution listening session. And as I said, before we head into our resolutions, I wanted to give the opportunity for some of our nominees to standing committee to give a brief introduction and say hello. For those of you who are voting members of our annual convention, you know that you will be voting on standing committee members at this year's annual convention, as we do every year. We have openings both in the clergy order and the lay order, as we do every year, as our standing committee rotates on and off. You can see all of the nominees and read all of their bios on the annual convention website. And right now, I'd like to take the opportunity to invite those who were able to join us on today's call to say hello. And of course, not everyone is able to, because it's the middle of the workday and some weren't able to come. But for those who were, I wanted to give that opportunity. And I'm going to start with our lay order today and give Ted Keatsman the opportunities to say hello.
Thank you, Stacy. My name's Ted Keatsman. I'm currently the senior warden at St. Mark's in Mystic, which is a lovely church, and we're fortunate to have a very energetic and creative rector. So we've kind of come through the pandemic in good shape. So I'm about done with, I'm closing on my second year as senior warden, and during this time I've listened in to the Wednesday morning, bishop and warden's calls. So I've gotten a better sense for the broader diocese. And I'm especially inspired by Bishop Jeff. And so I'd say it was a couple of weeks ago, Stacy asked me if I'd be interested in applying for a position on the standing committee, which I said, I don't really know much about it. And she said, you'll do great. So I don't know. I appreciate her confidence in me. I don't bring I notice a lot of standing committee people are lawyers. I'm not a lawyer. I've been an engineer and worked in the corporate world. But I think I bring some curiosity, and I'm trying to become a better listener. And I'd like to think of myself as more encouraging than critical. So that's who I am.
Thank you so much, Ted. The other two lay members who, as I said, weren't able to join us at this noonday time are Tom Roos and Jessica Vandervoot. Both of them, their bios are online, so I do invite you to read them, get to know them a little bit, as we will be electing two members of the lay order to standing committee at annual convention. I'd like to turn now to our clergy nominees, and I see the Reverend Matt Handy here, and I'd like to invite him to introduce himself to our group.
Hello, all. I'm Matt Handy. I'm the priest in charge at St. Luke's in South Glastonbury and St. James in Glastonbury. And I'm just very excited to be a part of this process. I've worked with the diocese for about 9 years before I went into mostly or full-time parish work, and just love the people, love serving the people, and hope I can continue serving in this capacity. I serve on the board of Glastonbury Links Together here in Glastonbury, and we are really focusing on feeding ministries, providing lunches to kids in need of and in need of food through our backpack program, and also giving directly to the food bank in town. I served as an alternate delegate to this past general convention and other stuff. And I feel like I'm really starting to talk too much about myself. So I will say that I'm excited that you'd consider me as a member of the standing committee, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. And there are two other clergy nominees who, again, weren't unfortunately able to join us, but they are the Reverend Marcus Haley and the Reverend Andrew Kryzak, who are standing for election to our clergy seats on standing committee. And I invite you to read their bios on the annual convention website. So episcopalct.org/annual-convention will take you to everything you need to know about convention. And thank you both so much for taking time out of your day. I know you were there Thursday night as well. Susan, I see your hand up. Yes.
Thanks so much. I have a question. How many members of the clergy will we be nominating? Is it one or two or?
Two. So we will be electing 2 lay people and 2 clergy members.
And a follow-up question, forgive my ignorance, but as a lay delegate, do I vote on both clergy and lay or just lay or
Nope,
both?
you vote on all. You vote on all.
Thank you.
That's a great question. Thank you so much, Susan, for asking that. What a great question. Yes, you will vote on everything. As a full member of convention, you got vote on everything that comes before convention.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you both. Thank you all. All right, well, let us move toward what has brought you all here today, which is our resolutions. We are going to be discussing 5 resolutions today, so we've got our work cut out for us. The first 2 resolutions were already discussed. Hopefully you made it to those. Those are the ones related to our 2025 budget. Those were largely discussed at our budget listening sessions hosted by Canon Rosanna Rosado and the rest of the finance team. Those should be online soon on our YouTube page. So those, as I said, those will be posted soon and you can go back and review those. But resolutions 1 and 2, budget of convention and clergy compensation resolution, were discussed at those sessions. So we will be skipping over those. Jumping to the end of our resolutions list, the final 3 resolutions coming before convention this year are mergers, our parish mergers. All parish mergers have to be certified by annual convention, and we have 3 parish mergers coming before us this year. Each will be their own resolution. And while we are very excited and will celebrate vociferously with those parish mergers when we get to annual convention, didn't really feel like we needed to have conversations. I guarantee you they have done their work. They have done the hard work of processing what it means to come together in new life as a merged parish. They are ready to go. They are excited. And when we get to convention, if you have questions for them about their process, they will love to talk to you about it. So in the meantime, we do have 5 other resolutions 3 through 7 that we will be discussing today, and we're just going to go in order. And the way we're going to handle this is I will read the resolution out loud, and then I've asked a member of the resolution submitting group to join us here today, and I recognize pretty much, I think, who's speaking to most of them, but if I get it wrong, let me know. And I will then invite that person, the person who's speaking about that resolution, to give us a little background on what brought about this resolution, why is this coming before convention, offer us a little bit of insight into what got us here, and then we'll open for questions. And once all of our questions are answered, we will then move on to the next resolution. Keep in mind, if you are thinking about an amendment, if you're wondering, hey, I hear your answer, but this doesn't quite do what I think it needed to do. I wonder if there's an edit that needs to happen. Any edits are going to be amendments at this point. We cannot edit a resolution that has been submitted. If you want to offer an amendment as a voting member of convention, if you are such, you can do that. And there is actually a mechanism to do that in advance this year to help us with translation and interpretation, as well as just to get those things out in front of people a little earlier. There's a link on the website to do that, and I'll talk about that a little bit more at the end. If you are not a voting member of convention and you still think, hey, it'd be a good idea to think about this amendment, talk to a voting member of convention. Your parish has 2 lay delegates, and all clergy are voting members of convention. Everybody clear on where we're headed, what we're going, what's going on? All right, off we go. Our first resolution that is going to come before us is resolution number 3. This is clarifying reparations board membership. And Canon D. Littlepage is with us today. And Canon D is actually sitting in the room across from me. And they will be speaking to this resolution. I'm going to read it aloud and then turn the floor over to them. Resolved that the reparations board be appointed by the bishop diocesan and shall include 1 bishop ex officio with voice and vote, and at least 1 lay representative from each of the remaining and worshiping communities in the Episcopal Diocese of Connecticut: St. Luke's, New Haven; St. Monica's, Hartford; St. Mark's, Bridgeport; St. Martin's, Hartford; and 1 lay representative from each from the predominantly Black parishes of St. Andrew's, Stamford, and St. Stephen's, Bloomfield; 2 clergy of African descent, the treasurer of the diocese, and 1 representative each from Mission Council and Donations and Bequests for Church Purposes, Inc., with the overall membership being at least 60% people of African descent.
Thank you, Secretary Cole. At last year's convention, the convention passed Resolution 6, acknowledging the 175th anniversary of the abolition of slavery and creating the Reparations Fund. in that, oh, sorry, I forget the hours here. In that resolution, it calls for the creation of a reparations board. However, the composition of that board did not include all the stakeholders who are necessary to move the full work of reparations forward, particularly representation from the Black churches and Black clergy. And so this resolution this year explicitly lays out the composition of the board in a way that will allow the work to move forward, not just with the financial aspects, but also the wider work of healing the wounds in UCCT caused by the legacy of slavery and subsequent racism.
Thank you, Canon D. Are there questions about this particular resolution? Clarifications, wonderings? Feel free to raise your Zoom hand, or we are a small enough group, just sing out. Yes, Pat.
Hi there. I couldn't find my Zoom hand. So I obviously should have studied the material online before I came here, but is this really creating a permanent board as opposed to sort of a short-term task force to continue the work going forward?
It is clarifying the board that was created in last year's resolution. So yes, my reading of last year's resolution is that it creates a permanent board, a board to oversee the reparations work, and this resolution is simply building on the ones from last year.
Okay. I'm having a little hard time hearing you, Dee, because of the echo, but I think I got your answer.
Should I come over to that computer, Stacey?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just come over here just so that.
If you do echo, canceling speaker phone.
Okay, try that. Sometimes we have problems with some of our technology, so I apologize.
Oh,
I'm coming to the computer over here. Can you hear me better here?
Oh, absolutely. Much better. Thank you.
Okay. So it's building on last year's resolution to clarify the board that was created last year.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's not a task force, it's a standing board.
Okay. Excellent. Good.
Susan, go ahead. I see your hand.
Yeah, it just as I applaud that 60% of the membership on the board is going to be African American descent. I just applaud that thought process.
Thank you. Thank you.
And will these members be elected or invited?
Appointed by the bishop.
Sorry.
They'll be appointed by the bishop.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Dee, this is Linda Spires. I just have a quick question. What's going to be the process for replacing a member when a member has to leave the board?
So in last year's resolution, which was not addressed in this one, so that still stands, it said 3-year terms. And so the understanding is that it would be appointment, but the terms are 3 years, according to last year's resolution.
Great, thank you. I'd forgotten that. Thank you.
Yeah, so this didn't change that part, it just changed the membership of the board. It just clarifies the membership of the board.
Great.
I believe it was 3 years. Yeah.
All right. Excellent.
Other questions, concerns, wonderings? All right. Seeing nothing further, we will move along to our next resolution. And let's see. Our next resolution is Resolution 4, recognize May 5th as Red Dress Day. Diana, are you here to speak to this one? Excellent. All right, I will read out the resolution and then I will invite the Reverend Diana Rogers to speak to this resolution. Resolved that the 240th Annual Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Connecticut recognize May 5th of each calendar year as Red Dress Day, remembering missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And be it further resolved that the 240th Annual Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Connecticut encourage its worshiping communities to commemorate missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And be it further resolved that the 240th Annual Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Connecticut invite the Journey of Discovery with Indigenous Peoples Ministry Network to create and provide Red Dress Day liturgical resources as approved by the bishops as needed for worshiping communities to use in their principal services nearest to May 5th. Diana, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Stacy. So, not by resolution, but sort of by, what do I want to say? Common consent, we have thought about having land acknowledgements in our bulletins and other on our websites, that sort of thing. By the way, I am Diana Rogers, and I'm the priest in charge at Christ Church Middle Haddam, as well as being the co-convener of this ministry network. And our particular land acknowledgement at Christ Church Middle Haddam actually is an adaptation from South Church in Middletown, because I know it was written with Wangunk tribe input. And in that it says, while we acknowledge the land, we also know that this is just a first step in order to seek justice for our Indigenous friends, members, and neighbors. And because we use that, we look for ways to be intentional about seeking justice for the Indigenous tribes. So this is an attempt at doing that. One of our members, who is an Abenaki member of her tribe, said that this was a really important, this understanding of acknowledging that Indigenous women and girls are 5 times more likely to be murdered or kidnapped and never found. And so this is a very important acknowledgement for our Indigenous members and the peoples of Connecticut. The Connecticut legislature back in February, and actually then again on May 5th of this year, acknowledged and recognized May 5th as this Red Dress Day. Why is it a Red Dress Day? A long time ago, in Canada, as a matter of fact, Jamie Black, an artist, took this need to recognize these missing and murdered women and created an art project of red dresses hanging in the woods, because the bodies are invariably found buried or just left, discarded in the woods. And from that project, Canada officially acknowledges Red Dress Day, and it has come down into the United States, where there have been other exhibits of red dresses. So in the state of Connecticut, the Institute for American Indian Studies in Washington, Connecticut, has an exhibit of the red dresses, and also a traveling exhibit that can come to your church, or, as I hope, in 2025 to come to the cathedral, where it will be on view around the date of May 5th. And and the Mohegan tribe was actually the instigators, or they were the ones who pressured the Connecticut legislature to acknowledge this. And so this is a way for the Episcopal Church to take an intentional step towards justice for our Indigenous members as well as for the peoples of Connecticut.
Thank you so much. I'm going to now open the space to questions or wonderings about this resolution. Yes, Susan. Oh, you're still muted.
Thanks so much, Diana, bringing this to our attention. Could you flesh in a little bit about how you could have the art exhibit come to a church? How does that work?
You just need to contact the Institute. My contact there is a woman who's a Shattuck, and her name is Darlene Kaskak, Kaskak. And she is actually coming to Christ Church Middle Haddam on the 17th of November to tell the creation story of her tribe in our 10 o'clock service.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned that at the bishop's call, I remember. So November
17th.
17th, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any other questions or wonderings? Yes, Mary.
I'm Mary Muller from St. Paul's in Southington. I'm one of the lay delegates, and this is just a comment. We had a small group in our adult forum talking about these resolutions last Sunday, and there was some interesting conversation about that and what people's awareness or lack of awareness is about this issue. And I and several other people have encountered this idea and this art exhibit, which tries to bring public awareness to this situation in several works of fiction. I've read a couple of novels that deal with the, one was to do with the Ojibwe culture in Minnesota and the problem with lack of or confusion or inconsistency in law enforcement jurisdictions, and the Native American community being thought to be, less important, and missing children or missing women, just part of the situation. And so I think it's interesting to see art in terms of the red dress exhibit actually appeared in another novel I read, an actual representation of that, and also that this different ways artists can bring an issue like this into awareness where it might not be in the morning paper or your news feed or something like that. But anyway, I think it's really interesting and important.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or wonderings before we move on to our next resolution? Yes, John.
Hi, John Pope, that's my name, and I'm a lay delegate from St. Anne's in Old Lyme. And I'd like to know what the name of that institute is that you mentioned, Diane.
Yes, it's called the Institute for American Indian Studies. And it's in
Gotcha.
Washington, Connecticut. So it's part museum, part education. They have indoor and outdoor exhibits and a number of traveling shows that they can bring to your church.
Okay, that's great information. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Diane, for bringing this resolution to our group today. Well, with that, we will move on to our next resolution. Our next resolution is resolution number 5. Consideration of amendments to ECCT canons 1, 8, and 11. And for this, I'm going to be turning to our Chancellor, Brad Babbitt. And instead of reading out all of the canons, which we discussed at the last meeting, may not be the best decision, I'm going to let Brad sum up what the changes to these canons are as part of his explanation about this particular resolution. So Brad, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Stacy. I'm happy to do so. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brad Babbitt. I serve as Chancellor to the Diocese, which is just a fancy name for the bishop's lawyer. In that role, I also convene Faith and Order, which is a group of volunteers from the diocese who gets together and studies our canons and tries to figure out how we need to improve them or how we can improve them, and to develop resolutions that and to implement, to design resolutions proposed by others. And that's what I have to present to you today, 3 of them actually. The first resolution itself has 3 different changes in one. The first is a change to Canon 1, Section 11B. Canon 1, Section 11B was adopted, I think, in 2013, some time ago. And what it says essentially is it establishes a threshold that parishes and worshiping communities, if they exceed that threshold in terms of withdrawals from their endowments for operating purposes in a 3-year period, and they go past that threshold. The threshold's 25%. And if the parish or a worshiping community goes past that threshold, then the bishops, with the advice of the standing committee and the recommendation of the mission council, can take certain steps relating to the governance of that parish or worshiping community. So that's what it currently says. That's what it says now for almost 11 years, I think. The change that we're proposing with respect to Canon 1, Section 11B is to include the words net of contributions to its endowment in the current year. That's new language. So the way it would read is, if a parish's or worshiping community's cumulative draw for operations, that's critical, for operations on its endowments draw for operations on its endowments over a 3-year period, net of contributions to its endowment in the current year exceeds 25% of the average net asset value of its endowment during the withdrawal period, then the bishop, with the advice of standing committee and the mission council, can take certain steps. That inclusion of the concept of net of contributions to its endowment in the current year makes for a better and more holistic analysis of the financial condition of the parish and the worshiping community. Without that language, the focus was only on the money coming out of the endowment and didn't take into account the money going into the endowment in the current year. So it's possible that they could, a parish could receive a great big bequest in the 3rd year and the 3-year period, and they would have exceeded the 25% endowment threshold draw for operations, and that would give theoretically the bishop the bishops the right to invoke Section 11B, not taking into account that somebody had just given $50,000 to the parish or some big chunk of money to the parish and into the endowment. And that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You're only focused on one side of the ledger. You need to focus on both sides of the ledger, in and out. So anyway, so that was the thinking behind the change to Section 11B. This was recommended by the folks on our finance committee, led by Canon Rosado. So that's the first of 3 changes proposed in this resolution. The second relates to Canon 8. Canon 8 is the canon that describes the mission council and establishes the mission council and describes how it works and how it's put together. Specifically, Section 2 of Canon 8 articulates when the term of new members of Mission Council starts. And what it says today is that the terms of new members starts on January 1 of the year following their election at annual convention. That's inconsistent with the terms that we have for members on the standing committee, for instance, and other commissions and boards whose terms start at the adjournment of convention. And so we have a situation where the terms of the Mission Council start on a different day than the terms of basically everybody else who's serving in a role in the diocese. So that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to us. And it was proposed that we switch the start date for terms of new members to the Mission Council to the adjournment of the annual convention at which they're elected. And so the revised language in this resolution related to Canon 8 does that and changes the start date for the new terms to the adjournment of the annual convention. So that's the second change that's proposed in this resolution. And then the last change is relates to Canon 11, which discusses our regions and ministry networks. Specifically, Section 2 provides that each region will be served by a region missionary. That's the way it reads currently. It presupposes the existence of a region missionary. Several years ago, the bishops and the diocese moved away from having employed roles by the name with the title of region missionary. So we don't have those positions anymore. So a change that's proposed in this resolution would be to catch up, as it were, to what our current life is, how we're currently living here in ECCT. And the change is to say, if adopted, it will say each region will be served by a member of diocesan leadership. So that's the change, moving away from the title region missionary to member of diocesan leadership. So that's the proposed change. Those are the three changes that are proposed in this resolution. I'll stop there, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have any about those proposed changes.
Pat, yes, go ahead. And then Susan?
Yeah, hi, Brad. Can you define member of diocesan leadership?
It would be either a staff person or a person appointed by the bishops, a non-paid person appointed by the bishops. It is not defined in the canon, and it would be flexible based on the bishop's selection. Currently, I'll leave it there. Other folks may have more of an understanding of what that term would be, but it would be someone appointed by the bishops.
Someone appointed by the bishops, okay. And does this canon also talk about the regional deans?
That's not addressed in Canon 11, that the regional deans are not established by canons, by this canon. That's a position that was created by the bishops, and the regional deans, you're absolutely right, serve in some of the ways that region missionaries used to serve.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
You bet. Thank you. Susan, did you have a question?
I have a follow-up question on the member of the diocesan leadership, for the leadership teams. Is it going to be for each region or just one person for all regions?
I think that's flexibly in the hands of the bishops to decide.
And is it proactive? Do they reach out to us or do we reach out to them? I mean, how does the engagement happen?
I think when a member of diocesan leadership is appointed, that could happen either way. You could reach out to them or they could reach out to you.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Of course.
And then resolution, the first one about the net of contributions, the cumulative draw, as far as the way the money works.
Yep.
Excuse my ignorance, but is the issue how much that it affects the contributions that the parishes are going to pay to ECCT?
No, that has nothing to do with it. No.
Okay.
The common mission support is not established by Canon 1, Section 11B. and it would not be affected by this. This relates to when a parish or worshiping community has an endowment, and they're drawing, the parish or worshiping community is taking money out of that endowment to support operations, not to, you know, if there's a if a parish wants to put a new roof on the building and needs a whole bunch of money because it's a really big roof and it's slate or something, that would not be affected by this. That's not an operational cost. But if a parish or worship community is taking money out of endowment to pay salaries or to keep the lights on or to, you know, pay for operations, and if a parish or worshiping community spends more than 25% of the endowment for operations over a 3-year period, that's what Canon 1, Section 11B applies to. And the change that we're proposing here only requires that the analysis include not only how much is coming out, but how much has gone into the endowment in that last year of the 3-year period.
Okay, thank you very much for that
Of course,
clarification.
of course, you bet.
Yeah, and I had a follow-up question on
Oh,
that,
sure, Pat.
if I may, on that same resolution. And you just said in the last year of the 3-year period, any contributions? So I was just a little more curious about how the math is going to work.
Well, any contributions in the first 2 years of the 3-year period will be already considered, because the analysis relates to 25% of the average net asset value of the endowment.
Right.
So in the first 2
It'll
years, the average, any contributions would necessarily be considered in terms of when the calculation of the average net asset value of the endowment is prepared. But so if we didn't have this language, then at the end of as the end of the 3-year period is coming up, there's no the average net asset value in the endowment during the 3-year period would not include whatever just happened to go into the account, in the endowment, in that 3rd year. So this means you're going to take it into account. So you're really getting a better, more accurate, more holistic view of what's happening in the parish and worshiping community.
Okay, thank you. That's good clarification. Thank you.
You bet. You're welcome, of course.
Ken Ranjit?
Thank you, Stacey. I'm Ranjit Matthews, and I serve as canon to the ordinary. And I just wanted to give some just broader context to what Brad was sharing around this canon, but just more broadly. You know, just a couple of days ago, we celebrated Bishop Mello's, certainly his ordination and consecration. It's been 2 years now, and part of his work, certainly over the past 2 years, has been in walking alongside our parishes and meeting our parishes where they are. And at the end of last year, part of his sort of unfolding vision was, realizing there was some different movement in terms of, what he envisioned for how the diocese moved. And that meant, moving away from the region missionary model. And then, over this past year in 2024, envisioning how region deans might serve, particularly our clergy, in over our 6 regions. So they have a particular relationship with our clergy that the deans do. And in particular, our region leadership teams have been sort of holding this work over the past year. And one of the hopes that we've had in 2024 is that, as the bishop envisioned last year, was inviting a director for congregations and transitions to support region leadership teams more broadly. And there's so many ands. With Canon Tim Hodap retiring at the end of December of this year, that is work that we are relooking, right? As we say goodbye to Canon Tim and invite a new canon to support and move into that role, and at the same time continue to see how this work and our region leadership teams need to be supported with a director that hopefully, God willing, the new canon will call in. So I just wanted to give some broader context of Bishop Mello's sort of envisioning and what that will look like in the coming year. So it was sort of tangential, but also adjacent to what Brad was sharing. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions, or wonderings about this particular resolution? This group of three? All right, well, let's move forward to our next resolution, Resolution 6. Consideration of amendments to Canon 12, Convention Procedure. Brad, I return to you.
Thank you, Stacy. So this is a change to Canon 12 convention procedure. Canon 12 basically has some, what's the right word? Housekeeping rules for how we act, how we get together and do convention. And so one of the housekeeping rules that we have is the deadline for submitting resolutions. It's currently 4 weeks before convention starts. It used to be longer because we used to actually have to print them and copy them and put them in the mail and mail them out to everybody. We don't do that anymore because we have the internet and we have other ways to do that. So years ago, several years ago, we shortened it to 4 weeks. We got a request, the Faith and Order Commission got a request from the folks responsible for developing the budget of convention, which takes a long time, actually, each year. They spend months on the activity, and they engage in it with real faithfulness and hard work. And they asked for the opportunity they asked for two things. One, to encourage anyone who has a resolution or a desire or a hope that convention will engage in an activity that would have an effect on either the endowments or the budget of convention. And they're hoping that to bring folks who have those kinds of wonderings and passion and desire into the budget creation process, as opposed to simply waiting until convention and then presenting convention and saying we want to spend X dollars. And convention doesn't have the benefit of understanding what the impact of spending X dollars might be, either on the endowment or on the budget of convention. And it's also very difficult for 550 some odd people sitting in a room to get all of the facts they need to understand what the proposal is when it's being proposed for the first time on the floor of convention. So the folks in our finance committee who are responsible for developing the budget convention asked if there's a way that we could ask that any resolutions that call for or require the expenditure of funds from the budget of convention or from the endowment to be submitted early in the year, which would allow the budget process to really analyze them and potentially to include them in the budget of convention, but an absolute minimum to analyze them and to be able to present to convention, here's the fiscal analysis of this budget, of this resolution, excuse me. So what this resolution amendment would do is two things. Principally, the first one is that resolutions that call for or require the expenditure of funds from the budget of convention and or the endowment held by the Missionary Society need to be submitted by March 1. Now, March 1 is obviously much earlier in the year than when the 4-week deadline for resolutions, other types of resolution, which is sometime in September or early October. March 1, we landed on March 1 because it's early enough that the finance committee can really dive in and understand how the resolution would work and do the fiscal analysis of it in a timely way. They were, to be honest, the finance folks were hoping it would be even earlier than March 1, but we wanted to balance balance timing and make it possible for people to really engage. Pushing it much later in the year becomes problematic, partly because the budget of convention is largely in shape, not finalized, but largely in shape by June. And then we get into the months of June, July, and August, when a lot of people take vacations, and it becomes much harder to get people and quorums to meetings and that kind of thing. And then suddenly the fall starts and we're in September and it's already sort of the final countdown to convention. So that's how we landed on March 1. The other thing I'd say about this is that the role of the finance committee here is to analyze, not to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, not to say, sorry, that resolution cannot go to convention, or not to say that resolution should be turned down or should be voted down. Rather, it's just to give convention the information that would be helpful from a fiscal perspective about what the proposed resolution would do, or how the proposed resolution could be funded. So that's the big change here in this resolution. Another change is in subsection C, which provides that the resolution to adopt the budget of convention, it will not be subject to an amendment, but instead will either be voted up or voted down as it currently stands. This is a process. This is the way most other dioceses in our church handle their budgets. They don't allow amendment from the floor. We've historically allowed that, although amendment, I can't remember the last time we had an amendment. It's been quite a number of years, but it did happen while I was chancellor. So sometime after 2007 has happened. It's really problematic, however, to start amending the budget when you're doing so in a committee of 550 people sitting in the room, and you start with a balanced budget. As much goes out, as much comes in, right? And then if you're going to start modifying it, you gotta, if you want some line item bigger, you gotta, some other line items got to be smaller, which is the process that the finance committee goes through over the months, the 6-8 months before convention, and doing it at convention is very challenging. So subsection C would rule that out and would say, we're going to vote on convention, on the budget convention, thumbs up or thumbs down. And if people feel strongly, there are listening sessions before convention, so you know what's coming. And even more than that, there's always room in the finance committee, and they would love to have you engage with them and join them and be part of this process. So I'll make a pitch. And Stacy will even send you a free pencil if you join the committee, just because you're listening to this ad. All right, I'll stop there and answer any questions anyone may have.
Yes, Pat.
So no questions, just an observation that so far, I think this will, this resolution in its two parts will probably engender the most discussion of the resolutions I've heard so far. I could be wrong about that, but I think that they are very good suggestions. Very good. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it may be. It's certainly a change in our process, and our hope is that folks who have a strong belief in that we ought to spend money to do X or Y or Z will engage earlier in the process, and will have the opportunity to have their desire baked into the budget that's presented at resolution at convention, as opposed to raising it in a separate resolution.
Right.
Mary, yes.
So if somebody is proposing a program or a ministry that is going to cost money, they need to get that proposal in by March 1st. But the resolution that this, whatever it is, project be undertaken doesn't get voted on until the actual convention. So you're including the money you're saying the budget process isn't saying yay or nay to the project, but it's getting included in the budget?
Not necessarily, no. what could happen is, so if a group of supporters want an expenditure either from the endowment or from the budget convention, they can go, they will submit a resolution by March 5th. If the finance committee chooses to, the finance committee can bake that additional money into the budget convention, which would moot the financial side of the resolution. That they wouldn't need the resolution, the financial side of the resolution. They would still need a resolution to say, we want to, hire, if the proposal is to hire somebody or to do something or other, and convention's input is needed, then the rest of the resolution would be needed. But if the budget already has the money built into it, then nothing further would be required. If, however, if the finance committee doesn't bake that in and the resolution simply goes to convention with the fiscal analysis of the financial committee, the convention can say, yeah, we love that idea. We love this program idea. And we've read the fiscal analysis provided us by the finance committee, and we endorse that program or that new project, whatever it is. In which case, the next year, so let's say that resolution were adopted in 2024, in the budget preparation process in 2025, the finance committee would bake that project or proposal into the budget convention. And when it's adopted in 2025, the money would start being spent in 2026.
Okay, I guess I didn't understand that year ahead process. Okay, but in theory, something could get included in the budget and voted down at convention if the convention said we don't want to do this.
Well, no, I think it's if it's already baked into the budget, unless the whole budget gets turned down, which has not happened, thankfully, in my experience. So if the finance committee has already incorporated the expenditure into the budget convention, then the finance piece would already be arranged, would already be covered, would already be provided for once the budget convention is adopted.
Thank you.
You bet. Absolutely. Thank you for your question.
Mary Muller. The company that manages your prescription drug.
Other questions about this particular resolution? All right. Well, I will move us along to Resolution 7, our last resolution that we're discussing today. Consideration of adoption of a new Canon 17. And for one last time today, Brad Babbitt.
And everyone will cheer at the words one last time. Yeah, I'm Brad Babbitt. Still, I haven't checked recently, but still Chancellor of the Diocese. So this is a new resolution, and this resolution addresses removal of a member of an ECCT committee, commissioner, board. Some of our committees, commissions, and boards have their own governance structures like bylaws that would provide for how a member can be removed if that's appropriate. Many of our committees, commissions, and boards do not. And as a result, we don't have any mechanism by which a member who is either not attending or refusing to participate in the life and work of the committee, commission, or board, or is engaging in some other kind of misconduct or malfeasance. Without this resolution, we don't have any manner in which a member of a committee, commission, or board can be removed. So this was suggested to Faith and Order, and we developed this really focused on two things. One, we want to make it possible for someone who is simply not engaged or attending, or is someone engaged in misconduct or malfeasance, to be removed. And at the same time, we wanted to create some steps and some hurdles, if you will, or a process, let's call it that, that would protect the interests of the member as well. So as you can see, there are a series of steps. And the first step would be for the members of the committee, commission, or board who believe that another member should be removed to consult with one of the bishops of VCCT. And after that consultation, if the bishop has consented to that person, to a vote to remove the member of the committee, commission, or board, then the member whose removal is being sought needs to be given the opportunity to resign, which would, of course, obviate the need for a vote. If the person chooses not to resign, then the committee, commission, or board can hold a meeting. That meeting needs to everybody on the committee and commission or board needs to get notice of the meeting at least 10 days in advance of the meeting. And the person, before a vote can be taken, the person whose removal is sought needs to be given an opportunity to express their views about the situation. And only then could a vote be taken by the commission or committee or board to remove the person. So really, we're trying to balance the interests of the person with the interests of the body, the committee, the commission, or the board, to maintain itself. And again, this would only apply to those in those situations where the bylaws or the other similar governance structure of a commission, committee, or board doesn't already provide for a mechanism to remove someone from who's engaged in misconduct or malfeasance or a refusal to participate. Happy to answer questions if you have any. John?
So just to clarify something, it basically sets up a due process for anybody who is on a commission and people are thinking about eliminating that position. It sets up a due process that wasn't there before. Is that correct? Am I reading that right?
Well, because we're talking about volunteers in a church function,
right.
we try to avoid due process because that's not really a concept that applies. But that said, yes,
okay,
you're right about that. And it's not just that the process that we're developing to protect the interests of a member doesn't exist. The ability to vote somebody out doesn't exist. So there is no mechanism. For example, just to pick one example, the standing committee, there's no means for the members of a standing committee to remove another member who is simply refusing to attend any meetings. We don't have a mechanism to address that situation, which can be very challenging, not just the standing committee, and for any committee or commission or board. So this creates a process by which the other members of, again, just to use an example, the standing committee could vote, could at the end of the process vote to remove a member who is simply refusing to engage or participate.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for the question.
Yes, Susan.
Yeah, so if there's process in place and there still is no resolution, could it go to, this new amendment? I mean, could it be reconsidered? Let's say you want to vote a vestry member out. All right. Now, probably the in the parishes, voting for vestry members, it has a process. But let's say that they couldn't resolve the issue at that level. Would then it go to, this new process?
The vestries are not a committee, commission, or board of ECCT. This relates to diocesan level committees, commissions, or boards, not a vestry. Okay. Most vestries have bylaws of their own. We encourage vestries to have bylaws. In fact, Stacy can point anybody who needs a copy to template bylaws that we have that a vestry could adopt for itself. But this canon would not apply to vestries because vestries are internal to a parish. So this would not apply there.
Actually, that's the heart of my question was, at what level are you talking about? You
This
know,
this relates to the diocesan level.
diocesan level. Thank you
That-
so much.
Of course. Of course.
Any other questions or wonderings about this resolution? Yes, Linda.
I don't have a question or wondering. I just have a word of thanks to Brad for the clarity around these these resolutions that you've just covered are those that are not always easily understood. And you have presented them clearly for us all. So thank you. And I'm speaking as a member of Faith and Order along with you. You have done a great job. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. You're very kind as always. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Brad, and thank you to everyone who shared, both Diana and Kennedy, who helped us understand a little bit better our resolutions today. That, I believe, is all for today. I did want to share with you all, as I said, there is an amendment. Oh, yes, John, I saw your hand up. Did you have a question or okay. There is a space on the website. If you heard something today and you're like, I'm just not quite there. I think we need an amendment. First, I would encourage you, go back and listen again and think real hard. Think real hard. And if somebody else comes up to you and says, hey, I was reading the resolutions and I think we need amendment, go tell them to watch this video and then think if they need an amendment. And yet, this is part of our process and we welcome amendments should they come to the floor. And this year we have a process by which you can submit your amendments in advance. If you go to our annual convention page on ECCT's website, episcopalct.org/annual-convention, under resolutions, you'll see the opportunity to submit an amendment. As I said, this allows us to translate these amendments in advance so that we ensure that we are creating a space in which all of our siblings in Christ, not only those who speak primarily English, but also those in our community who speak primarily Spanish or Haitian Creole, are also welcomed in and have the same access. In addition, it allows us to provide those resources in advance to those in our community who utilize ASL, American Sign Language, so that they too can read those amendments and have better access to them before we come to the floor of convention and are all attempting to understand what we're all saying from a microphone to a dais to a computer screen. So I do encourage you to consider that option if you would like to take it. Otherwise, please do share, talk to other members of convention, those with voice and those with vote. Encourage people to consider our amendments, or excuse me, our resolutions, and speak with you if you are a voting member of convention about them. And we will be ready to go just barely over a week from today. If there are no other questions, wonderings, concerns, I just want to thank you all again for giving up your lunchtime to join us for this conversation. And thank you all and have a wonderful and blessed rest of your day.
Thank you, Stacy. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very useful.
Very, very useful.
Good.